Hello, good evening, everybody. This is our show and tell night. So this is an idea that we had with Simon at some stage. That what we're going to do is we're going to tell people about the stuff we make, and sometimes people ask, like, how do you make it? What do you do? And we're intruding on the pub nights and other nights, and we're trying to basically explain to people how to make stuff and how to construct stuff, and you connected something to something. It's interesting how you integrated that. So tonight we're gonna show and tell about stuff that we are doing, and the format of this is like we're gonna kind of talk for about 10 minutes about stuff, and then we'll let it run wild with questions and we're gonna get widely off topic by the end of this, I hope. So the idea is like that everybody kind of pitches in, but also everybody everybody gets something out of it. So tonight's subject is, according to our what's the topic there? Oh, it's the adding mixture to my audio setup. There it is. That's the topic. So Simon did some work on his radio setup. It's not quite finished, I don't believe, but Simon, you can take it away.
Yeah, I'm gonna go switch. I've got two cameras, I think. Hold on. If I can make this work. So I've got myself a mixer. You're gonna have to excuse the state of this bench. So I went out and bought a mixer, and the original intent was to connect up all of my radios to my mixer. There's a bunch of mixers out there. The reason I wanted to do it was primarily kind of three reasons. One, I'm going to cut this camera a second. Hold on. Reason one was basically I wanted some way of leveling out my ability to record. So I've been trying to record QSOs. I've been trying to kind of listen to my operating style, and I've got like a little mini voice recorder, and it wasn't cutting it. So the first thing I wanted to be able to do was actually record stuff. I also wanted to be able to use a better mic and share that mic across rigs. So I've got a variety of hand mics and all that kind of stuff. Wanted to do a bit of that. And the third thing was just the sheer blooded mindedness of it. It was just trying to bring all my audio together and make things like FT8 a bit easier. So I've got a really nice 2-meter SSB rig that doesn't have any kind of data connection on the back. It's got an 8-ohm speaker output. So one of the things I've done is gone out and bought a transformer to convert that 8 ohms to a line level that I can then put into the mixer, get it to the right level, then put it into my PC to do things like FT8. That's the bit that's been causing me problems. The mixer itself is lovely. You can computer control everything. The hard part has been getting the radios to talk to the mixer. So there's been a bunch of issues. Cabling is one, and I know Nathan is a big fan of balanced cables. So I'll put the camera back up a second. One of the things I've tried to do is use XLR cables where I can. So if you don't know what an XLR cable is, it's basically a balanced cable. So a bit like a piece of coax, there's kind of a positive and a negative signal that cancel each other out. So they're a lot more resistant to audio noise. And that's been largely true. I haven't had any crosstalk or any issues like that across the audio circuit. And I know when I was talking to Peter, he was saying you'll get hum off the mains and you'll get a lot of crosstalk. Where I've been able to use XLR cables, it's been great. One of the issues has been how far you can have a balanced connection to the back of the radio. So let me just kill that a second. And the issue's really been trying to find a way to connect up the infinite variety of ways that radio manufacturers have got to connect stuff. So I've got 8-pinned in, 6-pinned in, speaker outputs. Just the back of that at the moment is a complete mess. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do to kind of connect it in. The audio industry sorted this all out. It's either a 3.5mm jack or an XLR plug of some sort. Radio manufacturers, there's nothing. So I've got a couple of adapters for my Kenwood FM rigs that take me to 3.5mm, and then I'm going 3.5mm to an XLR cable. not very satisfactory, very messy. So the reason this is in a state is I'm going to strip everything out. I'm going to make custom patch leads that are the right length and the right connector type. So I finally just decided to just do it because at the moment, I think the back of the old Kenwood has got a transformer that takes it from 8 ohms to line level. It goes line level to XLR cable, then XLR cable into the mixer. It's horrible. It's just stuff everywhere. So I'm going to try and see if I can get cables that are the right length and kind of productionize the setup, for want of a better term. Not audio wise, it's been fine. Taking it apart's been kind of instructive, just in terms of the way I'd set it up is that I've kind of got each radio as its own input. What you can do in the software mixer is you can then loop them back and you can put effects on them. So I just started to play with things like noise gates on the microphone, and you can add compression. And I didn't realize there's some compression turned on in one of the radios that I had to figure out how to turn it off because I put compression on compression and it sounded like this. So it's all that stuff you have to figure out about trying to get as clean an initial audio source as you can, as unprocessed as you can, and let the mixer do it. The old Kenwood rig's fine for that because it doesn't do anything at all. It's the newer ones where clearly they're doing stuff to them. They're doing a bit of, because they've all got DSPs in them, so they're all doing some sort of equalization. So there's a bit of that going on. But yeah, if anyone's got any thoughts or advice, I know a few people have done this before, and I know Nathan in particular is thinking about doing it as well. It's kind of a bit interesting just in terms of it's at least twice as much effort I thought it was going to be. I mean, even the wiring diagram for this has got messy at this point just because the number of adapters in there. So if anyone's got an idea what to do about the number of adapters, that'd be useful.
So Simon, few questions. Okay, so balanced audio, right? Goes to jacks, and I assume the jacks are unbalanced then. Or...
Yeah, so from the end of the, because no radio I've found has a balanced output. So if you look at most audio equipment, so if you go buy a synth or a module or anything bar a guitar, it will have a balanced audio output. So I've got to do balanced as far as I can, and then I've got to adapt to 8-pin on a Kenwood or 6-pin or a speaker jack, down to 3.5 mil, which is an unbalanced connection. Okay. So it's a bit like the Ballon problem, right? But for audio.
So I know that you had to match the impedance as well, the levels, right?
Yeah, the impedance is less of an issue. Most of the rigs I've got, the modern FM rigs, have an audio source that is kind of a line level. And line level, I think, is 1 volt, isn't it? That's the standard output voltage. The old Kenwood, the TR751, that's got an 8 ohm speaker output of 5 watts. So this thing's banging some volts and power out. So I had to go and find an audio transformer. So it's a bit of kit you'd use to convert your car radio down to line level. Normally used for hacking a radio that you can't get to the back of. So you take the speaker connection and then you can line level it. And again, people use those for old car radios. So the impedance hasn't, touch wood, been the issue. It's been the voltage level. It's getting the thing to be the right level so that the mixer can take it. Coming the other way from microphones, that's the problem. That's the next thing I want to solve. So the V71 Kenwood, I've got enough play in the mixer level. I can get the mic to be about right. The older Kenwood, they haven't messed with yet because I only got the adapter for the mic yesterday. So you've got to do the levels coming back as well. So effectively, if you've got mic gain on the rig, you can play with that, but you can also play with the gain of the mic audio coming in from the mixer. So you've got to get the levels right both ways, if you see what I mean. It's a lot less straightforward than I thought it was going to be. But hey, that's why you do it, right?
Yeah. And so the kit, right? Where do you get the kit? What mixer? How much do you have to pay for the mixer? Is it something like, I know the sky is the limit, right?
Yeah. You could start. You could go get a basic USB audio interface for like 30, 40 quid. with a couple of it, because I would say you probably need at least 4 to 6 inputs, because you're going to need one per radio. You'll then need something for the microphone. You'll need something for your computer if it isn't a USB interface in its own right. So you've got to think about how many channels you want. And then you need to think about, do you want a physical mixer? So Peter's got one with all the equalizers as dials on there. This one is completely software controlled. So it just has inputs on the front, and then all of the mixing is done on an app. And you can spend loads of money. You could spend £1,000 and not even bat an eyelid. But you could start really small. You could get a really simple USB interface, 40 quid, and connect up a couple of radios. You'd still have all the problems I've got with levels and connections, but you'd be doing into a bit of kit you're not really scared of cooking. Because I'm petrified. I've been scoping out all the inputs before I'll connect them to make sure I'm not about to put 60 volts into this thing. But there's tons of audio gear out there. Just go look at cheap studio gear. There's a world of secondhand studio gear out there you can nick and repurpose for this. It's just not ham accessible, shall we say.
And in terms of cabling, like where do you source the cables from? Is it Audi suppliers, or will the Amazing do, or?
Oh yeah, providing you're not going too exotic, you can get XLR cables everywhere. Amazon do, your local guitar shop will have them. But again, I've got some I've had for years, because I've had an XLR mic on my PC for a long time. So there's loads of cabling out there. The converters get a bit interesting. So trying to find a good speaker to line level converter has been interesting. I've gone through 3, just because the adjustment range wasn't right. But there's tons of stuff out there. Cabling's not too difficult, because basically there's XLR, or there's kind of TRS, so tip ring sleeve, so effectively like a 1/4-inch jack plug. That's the other standard. And in fact, hold on, I'll show you. This thing has combination sockets. So this will take an XLR, which is a 3-pin adapter, but it'll also take a 1/4-inch jack into there. So this happens to be a combination socket. So there's a few things like that. There's a few standards out there that you can use.
Okay.
But again, if you want to go super cheap and just wanted a really basic bit of kit, you get a second-hand USB interface mixer, 4 to 6 channels. You wouldn't spend much money. You'll spend more on cabling and bits than you will on the kit, if you see what I mean. As ever, it's cables and adapters and silly little transformers. That's what the money cost has been.
And
particularly if you want them a non-standard length.
So where's the danger? So I was like, for people to know, where's the danger of letting the magic smoke out? Like,
in theory, the inputs are protected on this, but I don't want to stick speaker level into a line level input. So speaker level on that, that's not too bad. It only drives like a 3-watt speaker, so I'm not going to stick much power in. But you just got to be careful. So through the transformer, I was just scoping the level and turning the gain down. In fact, I think Nathan suggested it. Start with the gain at the bottom and then just turn the gain up. But I did set the gain low and check it with a meter, because I wasn't entirely sure I'd turned it the right way. And I figure you'll only do that once.
Okay. And can that become like, can you non-linear? Like, can you be out of that dynamic range of something?
There's and that's the reason I want to match the levels. So one of the issues I've got, and the reason the audio transformers haven't been good, is that I was right at the bottom of the adjustment range. So for whatever reason, I'm using like this pot turns maybe 3/4 of a turn. I'm using 2 degrees of it to go from min to max. So yeah, that's one of the reasons you kind of want to check all your levels. But in theory, if you can get stuff in there at the line level reference, that's like the industry standard. So the mixer is expecting that. It knows about high impedance inputs, like from a guitar pickup, but it's never going to handle a speaker output. So you've got to convert it. But again, if you look online, there's lots of little articles out there about some of the issues you might find. And there's lots of good little, you can make your own boards to do the transform. But again, these things are like 12 quid. So I just bought one. But you can make your own audio transformer if you want to.
And how do you measure this? So like, how do you measure the output? Yeah, but like, where do you attach this? Where do you attach this one?
So you've got, again, in the balanced connection, you've got a ground and a plus and a minus. So that's easy. But on most of them, you just need a good ground reference and get the signal. The only problem with this meter is it's averaging it. So I just have to be a little bit careful with kind of RMS versus peak to peak. In audio, you're never too sure where the peak is. So there's a little bit of that, and just making sure you scope it out. What I'd really like is an oscilloscope, because then you could actually see what was going on, not just relying on my meter catching up with it. But again, you can see the difference when you're playing with the gain enough to be, okay, I'm good now. I'm at like half a volt.
But so how do you actually do this in practice? You whistle into the mic, and then like how do you?
I was banging tones down it. So because I've got a nice bit of USB audio kit, I just played a 3 kilohertz tone down it.
Okay.
So I just used a standard tone
from the mixer to the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Coming the other way as well, I just found a decent bit of activity. I didn't really want to do it off noise. I wanted to do it off actual signal. So I'm quite lucky on 2 meters. I've got some decent repeaters, so I could get some reasonable view of a decent signal.
Okay, cool. I'll stop questions now.
Yeah, go on, Paul.
No, I was going to say I'll monitor the chat if anyone wants to text a message, and read them out if anyone wants to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean the next steps really are I'm going to strip it all out and redo all the leads, just because the cable management is a disgrace. I also want to move some of my radios around, but I'm going to stick a PC in there as well. And then the other thing I want to do is have a better solution around the transform. So at the moment I've got adapters on transformers. I might crack the transformer out the box and try and adapt inside one enclosure. So rather than having kind of I've got the XLR cable, then a converter that goes to the line input of the transformer that comes out to the speaker. It's messy. I just want to tidy that up and have a neater solution, because at the moment it's a mess.
All right. So you could play the audio from the computer as well for the FT8.
Yeah, so you can bring it through, yeah, and you can effectively decode on your PC. In the long term, I probably won't do that. I'm going to put a Pi in there ultimately. But again, I'll probably connect the Pi to the mixer, just because then I've got the flexibility, because I can route it anywhere. Then I give the Pi its own. The Pi effectively becomes an input and an output. So effectively, the sound card of the Pi will then be on there as well. So you could, I mean, and again, the more stuff you add, the more you can route the sound, right? It should be easier because you've got lots of options then for how you route it and what you do to it.
Could you send a CQ call on FT8 on all the radios at once?
No, because they're all on 2 meters, and I can't run them all off the same antenna because I haven't got a multiplexer. But you can have your own voice keyer, right? Because of course you can just record the audio. So for contesting, you could just record all your CQ and run it off a soundboard and just, in fact, you could load it as a MIDI instrument and have a keyboard and play your CQ off a keyboard. That's not a bad idea. Because this has got, the mixer also has a MIDI input and output. So you can play the mixer like a MIDI control device. So you can send it MIDI commands. So you could control your levels off the pots on a keyboard. I might have a play with that. Any more?
Yeah, with
I would say.
Go on.
So I would say with the MIDI controller, you could also use the pots if you put in some sort of micro. When you have a keyboard input and it like does something else.
Yeah.
The MIDI input sent to control the radios. If you loop them back through the radio and send them via USB back to the radio. So you could use it for both audio and non-audio purposes at the same time, and it means you don't have to have 2 separate controllers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's worth.
What's,
I haven't really looked at the MIDI capability of this at all. It's got it, and I think people primarily use it to do stuff like level adjust off an instrument. So like you can control your own so effectively, if you've got a monitor level of the thing, you can do your own mix. So I can have independently mixed audio out to every radio or every source. So yeah, you could control it through MIDI, which is I haven't really played with yet.
well, I never heard of MIDI. I heard of MIDI, right? I heard there was something at some stage long time ago. But what is it?
Musical instrument digital interface.
Okay.
So it's like code for music. So you can use it to play notes, but you can also use it to send control signals. So you can vary the volume of an instrument using a digital message.
Oh, that's
It's like how you would send, people who do the guitars and they keep playing different pedals to change the sound and then add them together. That's MIDI control.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It started in the 80s and it's just the default. Every musical instrument you'll see, even analog ones, will sometimes have MIDI inputs and outputs because there'll be some bit of digital functionality there, even if it's only turn record on off.
I used to play with it a long time ago on my Apple original Mac.
Oh,
and
yeah.
even
Yeah.
you could even take an original computer like that or older that's got a MIDI card and play it on a modern like Yamaha or something.
Yeah. I mean, you can use it to describe music, but you can also describe all of the settings and all of the adjustments. So you can pitch bend and change volume as you go. They're just messages. It's up to the MIDI device to interpret them. But people use MIDI for control, other sorts of control, not just music. Because one of the things I keep thinking of with SDR radios just need a MIDI interface. And then you could be able to drive everything off any controller that supports MIDI.
I believe it's very similar as well in its concept to DMX for lighting.
Yeah, so DMX is I can't remember which way around it is. DMX is an extension of MIDI effectively. But yeah, you can send lighting control signals down the same cabling.
And I bet your MIDI is a lot cheaper as well, because I know a person who has, the Sun SDR controllers.
Yeah.
And the 300 quid a pop.
Yeah.
Just for the controller.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons you can do. And again, with MIDI, you can generate MIDI off a computer as well. So you can record MIDI. So you can record back sequences. So it's quite an interesting capability to have. You're kind of limited by your own imagination and whatever they've allowed the machine to do.
Yeah, the only MIDI reference I have, there was the ringtones were MIDI.
Yeah. So because MIDI can describe musical expression, original ringtones for Nokias were expressed as MIDI files because it's just playing a bunch of notes. But ringtones sound different on different phones because the phone itself is a different instrument. They don't always have the same sample. So there's an agreement about what, like the order drum kit sounds going, but everybody has a different sample for a hi-hat, right? So MIDI songs won't sound the same because the instruments are different, but the arrangement would be the same.
You'll probably find most phones, including the fruit-based one and the other competitor, will have a MIDI. You could just play a MIDI file without actually adding any extra software.
Yeah. And you can play it on a PC, but back in the day, you needed like a Roland MT32 or something to play MIDI files. Or a Sound Blaster 16. Sound Blaster 16 had MIDI. Yeah, I think it was Sound Blaster 16 had MIDI. But MIDI's well worth having a play with, Vic. There's some interesting capability there. I think for what we do with radio, MIDI's a nice accompaniment. Why we create cat control as a separate standard is beyond me. We should have just subverted MIDI. Because changing frequency is just a control message. Why did we invent another standard? Anyway, let's leave Japanese manufacturers out of this. But there'll probably be more on this when I've gutted it and rewired it, Vic, and got it actually working properly.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Next week, right? Who is this?
That was Mick, I think. Or he dropped something.
Or Derek? Mick?
Oh, it wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
I find the idea of using MIDI for SDR control interesting.
Yeah, it just seems a no-brainer to me because things like VFOs are just dials, right? They're just rotary encoders. And MIDI has got everything. It's got switches, it's got rotary encoders, it can do velocity. So that's the other thing, Vic. In MIDI, you can not just say I've pushed a key. You can say how hard or how fast you pushed it. So if you think about spinning a VFO, you can say, "Oh, I've moved the VFO a click," but you can also see the speed of it. So you could accelerate, and it's quite a rich control interface. It's certainly richer than having a little trim pot or a spinny rotary encoder.
Yeah, because it has to understand the strokes of the keyboard, right? And strokes of any other instrument, right?
Yeah. So it has a number of. So the basic MIDI data is the note data. So you've hit middle C, so that's C2, isn't it? Sorry, C4. But it also could encode, if your keyboard supported it, the velocity, so how hard you hit it, how long you held the key down, so if it has a sustain capability, and when you release it, you get a key up event. So if you think about like a VFO dial or like a volume slider or whatever, you could send all of that to an SDR and recreate a much more tactile interface than just clicking on a waterfall.
Someone's done it. Have a look at the link.
There you go. I'm not surprised somebody has done it. Oh, I like his controller. Yeah, they're quite nice. Well, yeah, because there's lots of. I mean, it gets used in video a lot as well. A lot of people have video shuttle dials to control kind of where you are in a playback stream. It's the same sort of idea.
What I'll do is I'll put that link on the wiki.
Yeah, because it can kind of encode the analog input really with
And the resolution of MIDI is really fine as well.
Is Oscar Echo 8 Tango Lima Kilo. Oscar Echo 8 Tango Lima.
Mick doesn't realise he's on the radio. I like it. The time resolution of MIDI is quite good as well, so you can really get some quite fine control. I like that. Looks quite nice. He only supports a couple of controllers though, by the looks of it. You'd need a reasonable bit of software to kind of map everything together.
But it's a starting point of looking into MIDI as a controller for radio stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was meaning if you wrote the interface software that would understand cat and kind of force cat control, you'd there'd be many people thanking you for that. Saying thank you very much. I will take this software and use it to attach to this.
But then they'll all go out and buy 500 quid MIDI control decks and secretly become DJs. It'd be really awkward. How are you going to explain to somebody, no, I'm not becoming a DJ, it's for my radio.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now, Simon?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I have an issue there. I have a couple of questions.
Go for it.
I should have begun with how to operate this. But is the mixer that you're using at the moment, is there any distinct advantage to using that type of software defined mixer or software operated mixer against say a Behringer, small Behringer, or some other kind of
so I mean you can go down the physical control route. I've got a 4-channel physical mixer somewhere. The advantage of going to the Behringer, the XR series, is that you can it basically acts like a synth in its own right. So because it's all software controlled, you can completely remap it. So every input can be mapped to any other input. You can create a stereo pair anywhere, and effectively, because you've got a control surface that's software, you can apply effects in a more complex way than you could do with a physical one. So physically, the EQ can only control that channel. I can actually say this EQ controls those 4 channels. So rather than having to set 4 channels identically, I can make 4 channels follow 1 channel. So you've got a lot more flexibility. The reason I wanted it is that some of the things I want to do, so I'm also ultimately going to hook all my retro systems into this. So I've got a couple of old Spectrums and things. The audio on those things, I kind of want to mix them and output them into something like Twitch. So having the ability to kind of level all your audio out and then move it all at once
Yeah.
That's much easier when you've got a software control thing, because you can gang them up in software and say, when I change the master volume, move all of these.
Yeah.
Or if you had them physically controlled, you'd have to physically gang them and move them.
And have you had any kind of, like, I say you had, crosstalk or anything like that, but had you any kind of RF problems, or had you any problems with the different impedance of the different microphones and all the different radios? Does that come into it?
Audio crosstalk's been really good, but that's because I've religiously used balanced cables everywhere. RF hasn't been a problem, but I'm not really ever running more than 25 watts.
Okay.
Because this is currently only my FM rigs, and I don't have a high-powered HF rig, so I can't talk to what sticking 200 watts out the back of this would be like.
Yep.
But again, in this environment, I would be more than happy to kick out, 50 watts. But above that, I would probably shield a lot of stuff a bit more than I am now.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm going to get much. The impedance issue has not been a problem so far, but that's because I've only got one radio that doesn't match, and that matches in the dumbest way possible. It acts like a speaker, so I can just transform the speaker voltage down, and I'm on my third transformer, so that tells you it's not straightforward. If I start, I don't think I'm going to put any more legacy rigs in here that give me more problems. The next thing to integrate into here is probably my G90, but that should be relatively straightforward because that's got a straightforward line level audio output. So hopefully I should be okay. RF wise, I've had no more issues than I've had on RF anywhere else. So I've got balanced antennas everywhere and a decent choke. If I shoved an NFED half wave in a 200 watt HF rig, I imagine I'd have issues.
You'd probably have a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Peter's your man for that. He's got a hardware setup and he's been looking at those issues. So when he's backing around, he's the man to talk about high power HF and this stuff. I probably wouldn't have it in open racking like this if I was going to do that.
And that type of mixer that you're using for somebody if somebody was starting off, is it relatively easy to use if somebody hasn't come across that before, or do you have to be an audio expert?
I wouldn't. If it's the first time you've played with audio, I wouldn't start here. It's an incredibly capable bit of kit, and I'm probably using about a third of it. But I think I can grow into it. I would start with as you say, a little Behringer 4-6 channel physical mixer. Yeah. Because just things like learning EQ and learning how to apply effects, that's easier physically initially because you can turn and hear it rather than I've jabbed pointlessly at a screen and nothing's happened.
If you had a typical HF, like any semi-decent HF radio there that has a monitor output on it, is it safe to say that you could hear the changes that you're making on the monitor output?
Yeah, you should be able to. And I know people do use this on the HF side, mostly to do things like compression on the mic audio, and you can do some stuff around EQ to kind of suppress noise in certain parts of the audio spectrum to make it easier to hear things. I don't really mess with the EQ much on mine because it's FM, right? It tends not to be something you can kind of tune out, but people do get very bent out of shape on those kind of issues. But for compression and noise gates and stuff, that's primarily what I want on the microphone side, just to kind of get the maximum amount of power out of SSB, for instance. The more you can compress it, the more power you can actually get out there.
Yeah.
So
when you're already kicking 10 watts out, I'd like to use all of it.
So when you say the noise gate, then that means you suppress, like, I don't know, below certain frequencies.
Yeah.
And above
So a bit like with Discord and keyboard clicks, right? You can basically say below this audio level, just chop it. But you can have a noise gate that breaks in gently. So you probably don't want a really harsh off-on. But you can, and again, there's lots of kind of schemes around how you do your noise gating. Usually you want to take out like clicking noises from the PTT and, you scraping the table. But there comes a level at which you do want the low part of voice. But again, the way I tend to run it is I've just got a noise gate there just to kill any kind of little ambient issues. And then I use a compressor on SSB, but I don't run it when I'm running FM because there's no point. You don't need the dynamic range around FM as much as you do on SSB. But again, there's other things you can do. If you've got a voice that's really low, you can also vocally shift, and you can do the same with the incoming audio. You can effectively mess with the audio that's in the passband. So yes, you can reach in the radio, but there's stuff you can do around the audio as well. So there's lots of things you can do, and you can also filter in the audio domain once you've got it. So again, if you've got a radio that isn't very capable around its audio handling, keep it as raw as you can, keep the filter as wide as you can, and then use the mixer to do some of the audio processing. It's not ideal, but if you've got an older rig that doesn't have, some of the more modern capability around DSPs, you can kind of leverage some of that on the mixer side. Gets a bit more complicated, obviously, doing it in the audio domain, but again, there's lots of tools out there that can help you. But yeah, I mean, the physical versus virtual thing, I mean, I've done that because that's a bit of kit I've wanted for a while. And it's got 18 inputs and about 9 outputs, which is more than I'll ever need, but I may end up using 12 inputs at this point. So, by the time I've got all my other bits of kit connected up, I may end up kind of using its connection capability, if nothing else.
So when you say 12 inputs, so the audio out of the radio, that goes into the input of the mixer.
Yeah, so every radio will be an input. Your microphone is obviously an input as well because it's making noise. All of my computers will then be an input. My PC will come over USB, so that whole thing connects to a PC via a USB link. It acts as an 18-channel sound card, basically. So any of the channels on there, raw or processed, are available to the PC. But I've got other computers I'll also connect as inputs. And then output-wise, you can then, I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's another one. I think I've got 9 outputs. Every one of those outputs can be leveled or can have any combination of any input you want. So you can send a dedicated mix out of every output. So you don't just have, again, an advantage over the physical. You don't just have one mixed output. This effectively has 7 outputs you can individually set, and they can be different. Then there's a monitor, then there's a headphone monitor. So, because this is built for bands. So the idea is that if you're a little 4-piece band, you each have an output, you set the mix to what you want for you to play. So the drummer, probably wants the bass guitarist, but he probably doesn't need the lead as high. Whereas the lead singer probably wants the drum track and a bit of the melody, but he doesn't need anything else. So you can all have your own custom mix. I probably won't simultaneously use custom mixes, but I might want a different mix going to my computer than is going to the radio.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
It can be. But again, if you think about, if you want to stream stuff on Twitch or things like that, you might want to set a different output to Twitch than you get in your headphones. So it's useful for things like that. And the same thing if you're contesting, what you hear in your headphones, you might want to be different than the thing that you record than the thing that you're then playing back out to the radio. So you've got some flexibility in what you can do. But I wouldn't, if that's your first mixer, wow. I would definitely start simpler and learn the basics.
The other thing that you could probably do there, Simon, if you've got multiple radios, some contesters will have it in one ear for one radio and one ear for the other.
Oh, that's interesting, because you could have actually a receiver on one thing, and then
you could basically have an SDR if you wanted. You could have an SDR in your left ear, your actual radio in the right, and be
So you mean I can have a hot green SDR in one channel?
Or you could have 20 meters in one and like 15 on the other, and be able to see which has activity and switch between them.
You could be doing all of that while another radio is running FT8 if you want, because you can just create an FT8 audio path that passes to your computer, and you never hear it in your ears because you don't mix it up in your mix.
Or you just use a Raspberry Pi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, ultimately I will end up using a Pi, Paul. But you could, if you want to, have you can have multiple things going on.
That's interesting. Okay.
And it's one of the reasons to do it as well, is just to see what you can do with it. So I've kind of got a basic use case, which is around having a single mic to drive multiple rigs. But while I'm in there's a lot of other stuff I want to do. Just being able to sort the audio out from a couple of old computers as well. Because at the moment it's such a pain. At the moment I have to pull the cable, switch it into the speaker. The level on a Spectrum is down here. The level on an Amiga's up here. So I have to then play with everything. It's just, actually I can use the mixer and just level the whole thing out.
So microphone wise, right? So we know that there is a range, in which it counts, right? So the microphone doesn't have to be super cool quality then, if you're gonna, or is it?
I am not an audiophile. I do not like the oxygen-free copper bullshit that gets talked. I've just got a 30 quid XLR, actually 40 quid XLR mic, and it's more than good enough, particularly for radio usage. You can go spend 170 quid if you want to, and I'm sure you'll get joy out of it.
I wouldn't necessarily spend 170 quid, but I would start with something reasonable, because then at least you could always trim it down. If you start with something absolutely terrible, there's no way of you improving that audio regardless.
Yeah,
as Simon said, I wouldn't spend 170 quid.
Yeah, there's some very, very affordable XLR mics that will far outperform what you're going to need. We're not into audiophile territory, right?
No, but these are the capacitive mics, or how do you pick one? Like, what do you get?
Well, I'll show you mine.
If it's for amateur radio, though, you might need a different insert if they've got inserts available, because the dynamics you need for amateur radio are different to what you might use on the PC.
That's why you have a mixer. You level it all out in the mixer.
Equalizer.
So mine just takes XLR. This has a cardioid pattern, so it's sensitive here and it's sensitive here. So if you put it in front of you, it hears here, it doesn't hear from the side. So this has a nice pattern on it, which is great for what I want to do. Also, you can use it for kind of a podcast. But because it's XLR, I can put it into the mixer and control the audio back out to whatever rig, in whatever way the rig wants the audio. And I've got it on a shock mount.
Very good. So in case you bang your head against it, though.
Well, more when you bang the table and you hear it on the microphone.
Or just use your webcam.
Well, to be honest, you can just about tell the difference. So I've got one of those Logitech cams with the two. The mic on this is pretty good. That's definitely better. Lower down, it's much better, but that's fine. I mean, with your voice, Vic, I'd probably get a decent mic just because you've got a lot of bass that a webcam mic wouldn't pick up necessarily. Like the response at the bottom end is quite flat.
I'm flattered.
But yeah.
It's like probably... me, though, with my webcam mic's absolutely useless, and you can massively tell the difference as soon as I put in my proper microphone at home. Yeah. As we've demonstrated multiple times when everybody's like, I can't hear you, and then all of a sudden you can hear me.
But that's probably your USB, not the mic. But anyway, mics over USB are always crap to some extent, even a good webcam mic, because USB is not built to it's the latency in the audio, right? USB is not really built to be a real-time thing, whereas XLR that's real-time. There's no digital processing. That is an analog signal coming out. So there's a bit of that in it as well. But mic-wise, yeah, I mean, you can get a reasonable mic for reasonable money, and you can do a lot with it.
Okay, so what about then? So we, as we are on the subject on the audio and stuff like that, I think we had a chat on the repeater with Nick today about this particular subject. So what about the decent gaming headset? Instead of a boom mic. Not everybody wants to have or has a space, for like a thing that's hanging here and just,
I'm the wrong person to talk to because I've got a Rode USB mic somewhere that isn't set up that I have on an arm that sits here. And then I wear Bluetooth headphones.
I've gone down that road. It's an absolute nightmare. Every rig wants it interface slightly different, and they all hate them. So personally, the way Simon's going about it is the right way to go about it. Yeah. Or the other option is to still mix your audio out, but just use the microphones that come with the radio, or a stand mic that comes with the radio that is already the right radio for the job.
And Nathan, you had some history with some mics from from communication headsets from Navy, right?
Yeah, but they were specifically altered and made sure that they worked with one Pacific radio and one Pacific radio only. You cannot plug them into anything else at all; they will not work.
The levels are noticeably different. Yeah, the levels are noticeably different across rigs.
We had to, the person who built them, which was Billy GM6DX these days, he had to put Pacific resistors and capacitors in with the connectors to make them work correctly with the icons. Otherwise, they just refuse outright.
Yeah, it's the mic input level is different, isn't it?
Well, it's that, but also the ICOMs produce the voltage out, so you can actually fry stuff.
Oh, nice.
You got phantom voltage.
So you've got to be really careful about it to take the voltage out of it as well.
Yeah.
Because I tried to use, like one of them magnetic mics that attaches to headphones, kind of as you want as a headset one. I tried that on an ICOM. I got a Pacific cable that should have worked with it. Would it work? Not a sausage. Yeah. And I spent nearly 60 quid trying to get it to work. And I could not get it to work at all. So I've been down that road. It's an absolute mess, to be honest. The only time you ever get exactly what you want is there is a company who specifically do them. They're an American company called Radio Sport. But you're talking, you have to buy a separate cable for every single radio you want to use. And the tips alone for them are stupidly expensive. So by the time you finish just for one headset, for one radio, you're talking nearly 300 to 400 quid.
How about, so let's go the easy road. How about someone gets a Hale headset,
Yeah, the Hales are not bad and they work pretty good. But again, the Hales are really specific to the brand of radio you're using.
Yeah,
but
that's the problem.
So I was thinking, could you not connect that to the mixer then?
If you're connecting it to a mixer and then doing a mixer input, then yeah, you could connect whatever headset you wanted. You'd probably be okay.
But it sort of defeats the object, right? Because you don't need that adaptation to the rig. You're going to do that in the mixer. So you can effectively control the mic gain in from the mix.
Yeah. Okay. So you could technically use a gaming headset. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. What I would say was, if you be in that, you could technically do that. It gets complicated because gaming headsets are really not designed for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. They were never intended for that purpose.
I guess my experience is really the opposite. I almost all the operating I've done recently is just using like webcam mics and like standard headphones, stuff like that. Because all the audio to the radios I use is going through a computer anyways. And I found that just fine.
And what radio do you run there? Do you run Flex or?
So the university club has a Flex, and so we're running it from across the city anyways. For UHF, we have a Kenwood, and it has a remote rig box attached to it, so it's also over the network, because we don't, our radio room is in the bottom floor of the university and the radios are on the top floor of another building.
But they're radios that can handle it, if you see what I mean. They're radios that have kind of got a reasonable audio interface on them anyway, right?
Yeah, this is the problem when you go with like the ICOMs. The Pacific standards is what's causing the issues, not the actual radios themselves. It's the way ICOM implements things that's the problem, and numerous manufacturers have the same issues when you're going directly into the radio. I mean, the Flex is probably one of the best ones for having easy connectivity, really.
Just to show you a physical mixer a second, that I've just found a good picture of one. That's the sort of thing if you didn't have a piece of kit like I've got. So the input outputs are all up here physically, and each one of these strips is a single channel.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, you've got a physical control for the volume for kind of the mix level, and then this is kind of the master output. So effectively, what you can do is you can equalize each track. You can kind of control how much of it then goes into the mix, and you can put, I think there'll be some effects in here, but you're doing all of that physically rather than in software. So that's what a physical one, they look kind of variations of this. And again, they've got XLR connectors.
The kind of problem with those mixers I found is they've an awful lot of inputs, but very few outputs.
Yeah, and I think that's only got 4. I think that's got a master stereo mix and it's got a monitor mix.
Yeah.
Whereas with this one, I've got 9 because I've effectively got the 2 stereo pairs, and then I've got 7 separate outputs. So you get much more output, because this is much more designed to mix something down to be mastered. Whereas the bit of kit I've got is much more about having individual mixes that you can share.
And I have one more question before I go, because I've put the brats to bed. the mixer that you're using, does it have some sort of visual indication on your computer of what the graphic equalizer is doing?
Yeah, so effectively the app will run on your PC, on an iPad, even on a phone. Yeah, and you can kind of see the level, so you can see live. You can kind of visualize, if you like. So it's got a spectrum analyzer. It's got all that kind of functionality as well.
Okay, perfect.
With regards to the Hiles, what I've got one, and I've just linked to the adapters. You basically your Hile headset will have one standard socket, and into that socket you put the adapter. And I think if you buy a Hile, they'll normally offer you the first adapter with the headset.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see the adapters now. Yeah.
Because I've got two adapters. I've got one that fits my Yaesu, and I've got another one. I can't remember where or what it is.
Yeah, they have like a whole ecosystem, don't they? You can map it to anything.
You can even get ones for like connecting to your PC sound card and things. So in the long run, there's probably even an XLR adapter. I wouldn't be surprised if there's one there. There you go. It says it there. The one without the image on the right hand side. Yeah. But yeah.
PTT is the other thing to talk about. The other thing I had to do was find a way of splitting the PTT.
On my Hile, I've got a traveler headset, and on mine, there's a PTT on the line.
Yeah, so I've got the same thing. I've got audio adapter cables where the TTT breaks out, and then effectively I've got a foot switch and a splitter. This was Nathan's idea, so I can drive either rig's PTT off one switch.
I've never got on well with foot switches, or I haven't found one I like.
Yeah. Again, there's personal preferences now around that sort of stuff, but that's the other thing you need to think about. It's not enough to just have the audio. You've also got to find a way to, because most hand mics have got the PTT on them.
At contest stations, people think I'm weird sitting there with the hand PTT while everybody else uses the foot switch.
Well, some people like the switch, don't they? Some people like the thumb switches. It's like a personal preference thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's I didn't think about it actually. You can just have like a simple button, just go like tick tick. Yeah.
Well, the simplest one I've ever seen is to get an old whiteboard felt tip pen that you use, or the teachers use, strip out the insides, and then screw in a normal micro switch on top of the pen, and then just run the wire through.
Yeah,
that's the simplest way of building a PTT button. And it takes like maybe 20p's worth of parts.
Oh, there you go. I found my my wiring diagram as well. If you want to see, this is how it's currently wired up. So this, before I ripped it apart, this was how it was wired up.
So that's a prototype 0.
So this was the original setup. So I've got my PC here. That connects to the Behringer via USB. So all of these inputs and outputs appear as USB audio on here. So I don't need an audio connection between the PC and this rig. I've then got my mic, which takes 48 volt phantom input power. So this powers the mic at 48 volts. That goes into channel 3 because these two are meant for guitar pickups. So that goes into 3. I think the 71 goes into 4, which is not on here, because I didn't have so there's an 8 pin in the back that goes into 4. This will go into 5 when I fix the mix. I've got 2 speakers that sit on the shelf, and that's my main left-right mix, so I can route it out to there. I can also route it to headphones and have a separate mix into my headset if I want. And then effectively I've got 2 outputs to each of the radios. So the mic input goes in here. I mess with the levels, and then I can set a level to come out, and that goes into my 751, and I've got a split PTT. So I've bought a line wire, you can see it there, that has a PTT jack plug. Then I have another connection. Again, it's another adapter that then goes into here, into the 71. So I can have a single mic input to both radios, and I've got different levels set on them. This one's a bit more fiddly to set up, with very touchy on the mic level, and I've got no gain control here for mic gain, whereas I've got a little bit of control there. And the bit I've been trying to work out is then looping the audio back into here. So I think this one goes into 4, this one goes into 5. I'm then going to have my Pi into 6, and then I've got a couple of computers that'll probably go into 7, 8, and 9. But again, I don't need to send audio back out to those. I only really want to hear the audio from them. Like, I'm not going to decode FT8 on a Spectrum, much as I really want to. So this is my current wiring diagram, but I'm going to change all of this because I'm going to rip it all out and start again and do some custom cables and try and just minimize the number of adapters in the output line, because that's just really messy at the moment. Oh, and this thing has a Wi-Fi adapter as well, so you can drive that software-wise from any device that can see it as Wi-Fi.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's more complex than I thought it was going to be, but it was a good tip from Nathan to break the PTTs out as well and have a splitter, because that's made life considerably easier.
You can also insert a little toggle switch in there as well. If you really don't want to PTT multiple rigs at once, you could physically switch between if you wanted to.
I'll never have both rigs on at once as a rule. Well, I know it's possible because I could have the Kenwood on UHF, right? It is possible.
Well, it was more if someone had a HF and a VHF rig, because they probably will have both of them on at the same time.
Well, ultimately, I'll probably put the G90 in there. But then the G90 PTT is a cat thing anyway, so I'll probably do the... Oh, no, you can't. I don't know. Can I? Why can I... Yeah, I've got a separate PTT line for that. I'll need to think about that. As you say, build a box, Nathan, right?
Yep.
So I imagine it's only like a volt or so, right? I can just use a really small relay or something. Just latch it.
Yeah, you can literally use, the standard microswitch.
Yeah.
So
like any standard microswitch you could use.
Yeah.
Mick has a question. Any advantage to using mics that require phantom voltage?
We could gain. I just prefer the sound of those because these are condenser mics. I just find they sound better.
Some people prefer dynamic mics. Some people prefer condenser.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to really test yourself to see what you prefer. Unfortunately.
When I used to have a YouTube channel, I just like those mics much more. Just a personal preference. You just find one you like the sound of, right? And you go from there. I don't think there's any quantitative difference. It's a qualitative sound thing. I don't think one technology is superior to the other. And because that can give me 48 volt phantom power, why wouldn't I?
It's there. We have to use it, right?
Yeah. There's probably proper people with degrees in audio engineering who can give you a precise reason why one is better than the other. I just happen to prefer them. That's all.
Very nice.
You got a converter box, Derek? You can get phantom power injectors, right?
No, well, come on, stupid thing.
Background.
Yeah.
It's a DSP. It's a DSP before it went.
It's fun because it's analog in, analog out. It's an inline DSP filter basically, so you can apply different equalizers and stuff like that.
Oh no!
Without ever going through a dedicated computer, and it's optimized to be very fast.
And it's probably worth saying you can do almost everything I'm doing here with discrete components. So you can get things that will let you mix the mic levels, and you can do that. It's not this isn't the only approach you could use to this. I just like a completely software controlled mixer's cool.
Oh, you just wanted that mixer, I think.
I've wanted this mixer for about 2 years. But again, I didn't really have a need. When I was just wiring a few computers up and doing a bit of YouTube, you don't need it. You just don't need it. But now, obviously, I have a legitimate use case.
Legitimately, that's a bit pushing this a bit far now.
And I had some store credit as well, so it had to happen. But no, I mean the only advantage, Mick, is that you've got a wider range of microphones you can use. But again, almost every mixer you buy will support either microphone type. Almost all of them have got that, and most of them will take kind of high impedance inputs as well. So if you've got a guitar or something, almost all of them will have a dedicated input for that, rather than having to have a transformer.
So I can sing the Eye of a Tiger,
If you want to, start rocking out on your axe, yeah, you're all set.
That's definitely should be like a QSO. Like we should just respond to each other with songs,
You're not allowed music, no?
No, well, it's an exchange of messages. I mean, you're not playing the music, you're playing the music. So,
Don't know. You could probably send MIDI commands over RTTY or something.
Now.
Now we're getting into worked all OARC. Sending somebody a tune over RTTY. Now that would be a QSO.
Have you seen the video of the folks in the US who were playing the Red Alert, the original Red Alert game over amateur radio packet?
Oh, so I saw someone doing Quake. It was Quake Arena. They're playing Quake Arena over UHF, which I thought was amazing.
Because the latency is similar to the original networking that was available.
Yeah, it's about 130 milliseconds or something, isn't it? Which is like the old T-base 10 networking. Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was as a technical proof of concept. I thought that was fantastic. You wouldn't want to play that. The lag was real, man. And the guy's strafing like this.
But that's not a bad thing. It gives you time to think.
Yeah, but it's Pika's advantage. We're going to get FPS here. You don't actually have to hit them anymore. You just have to hit where your machine thinks they're going to be. And they can't do anything about it because of the latency. They're dead before they know it. Cool.
I think we're coming up on an hour. I'm going to kill the recording fan. Oh, I know how. Wow. So there's a button with a little square on it. So thanks for coming, everybody. Subscribe, like YouTube.
Comment.
Comment. How do I do this?